All right, so it is 3 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, Looks like we have a relatively small group today. So any questions or anything like that, or anytime I need to go back and reiterate anything, just please let me know. Um, we will have a specific Q&A portion. So I'll quickly go into kind of what we'll cover today. First off, my name is Mike. Welcome to Pear Deck for PowerPoint Online. Today I'll be just giving an overview of the functionalities that Pear Deck has when integrated with PowerPoint Online. We'll walk through starting an account, logging in, what our Pear Deck homepage is going to look like. We'll also build a slide deck, so I'll show you how you're going to add the interactivity to your slides. We'll run a presentation where we'll look at the student and teacher views. We'll look at the teacher dashboard. We'll look at student pace mode. We will have two Q&A sessions. So once I am done showing us how to build slides, I'll go ahead and we'll jump into a presentation, and you can feel free to join it as a student. You'll be able to see what your students are going to be able to see. But I have a Q&A slide, an interactive slide set up that you can ask questions in. We'll have one at the end as well after we present. I'll show you some resources that are available to you. And then we do have a survey as well. When we get to that point, I'll also link the survey in the chat. It is an interactive slide as well, but if we run short on time, I'll put it in the chat. The feedback that we get from that survey is going to be very helpful for us in kind of figuring out what we need to do, if we need to change webinars, if we need to, add or take anything out, or if we need to create new webinars. So again, just really helpful feedback for us. Let's see. So I am going to be, I do have somebody in the chat who asked if I'm going to be covering the basis of Pear Deck. I will be walking through the basic functionalities of Pear Deck and how it works with PowerPoint today in this. And again, when I show you resources, I'll show you some things that are some places that you can go if you end up needing to revisit anything at a later time. But before we get started, I just want to briefly talk about what Pear Deck is. So Pear Deck is a tool built for educators by educators, relying on education research that shows that engagement is a means to reduce the achievement gap and increase student chances of success, both inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. So what Pear Deck allows you to do is it allows you to build interactive presentations using Pear Deck or Google Slides to try and increase our students' active participation, their acquisition of soft skills, so critical thinking, social emotional learning, analytical skills, things that are non-school specific, not content specific, things that will help our students outside the classroom as well. We're hoping to increase inclusivity in the classroom, creating an equitable educational environment in which everyone feels comfortable to participate, with the overall goal of improving school culture, increasing student success, and decreasing the achievement gap. So just a quick background on myself. I was a classroom teacher up through the last spring before joining Pear Deck in fall of 2020. And one of the things that I always ran into, I taught high school English, and I taught exclusively in Title I schools where I always had 35 plus students with limited access to resources, limited access to paraprofessional assistance. So with everyone in that class, it was really hard getting everyone to participate and engage, particularly when you had students who didn't feel comfortable raising a hand, asking a question, or participating in a discussion. So Pear Deck's going to allow those students to participate and to engage with our lessons without feeling like there's a spotlight on them. So we'll go ahead and we'll walk through building those slides in just a second, but I'm going to go to peardeck.com initially. And whether you have an account or not, when you get to this main page, you're looking for this teacher login button at the top right of the page here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click that. And it's going to take me to this page here. So whatever platform you are going to be using with Pear Deck, whether it's Google Slides or PowerPoint, you want to make sure that you are logging in with that type of account. Because you won't have a separate login for Pear Deck, it's going to use either a Microsoft or Google login in order to authenticate. So we just want to choose the platform that we'll be using. Since today we're specifically talking about Microsoft, I'll go ahead and click login with Microsoft. It's going to log me directly in because I was logged in previously. If you hadn't been, or if this is your first time logging in, it's going to ask you to answer a few questions. Once you've gone through that process and you've answered those questions, it'll take you to this main page here. We have some options that we'll look at when it comes closer to us actually presenting. But for now, I just want to draw our attention to this initial orange box in the middle of my screen here. So if I wanted to create a lesson from scratch, a brand new lesson with Pear Deck, I can go and click this create a presentation button and open up a new PowerPoint file. It's going to open up a brand new PowerPoint file, and it's going to give me one preloaded slide. It's going to provide me some additional information as far as getting started with Pear Deck is concerned. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that I have the Pear Deck add-in for Microsoft PowerPoint. So in order to get that, I want to go to this insert drop-down menu in this top menu bar here. So it's just to the right of that home button. And you're looking for an add-ins button. That might be on this toolbar here. For me, I have to go over to this more options and click that. But it's this little symbol here that has the two geometric shapes. So I'm going to click add-ins. And then I'm going to, if I need to, search for Pear Deck. I'm going to find the Pear Deck add-in and I'm going to install it. Once it's installed, I'm going to go ahead back to my home button here. I'm going to go to this more actions, and you again may see this button appear, but for me, it's in my more actions button. I have to click this drop down, and you're just looking for this Pear Deck icon. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And now it's going to open up my Pear Deck toolbar for me. So this is going to be where I'll go if I want to add any of our templates to my lesson, or if I want to add these question types to my lesson. One thing to make note of as well, you'll see this green present with Pear Deck button at the top here. We want to make sure when it comes time to present that we're not presenting through PowerPoint. So I don't want to click this present button up here. My students will see the slides, but they won't be able to interact with them. So I want to make sure that I'm clicking present with Pear Deck so that we're opening our slides and our presentation in Pear Deck. That way our students are able to actively engage and interact with our lesson. So if I wanted to, off the bat, just build a slide deck the way that I normally do, I can go ahead and add a new slide. And I can go ahead and create a question or a prompt. And I do apologize, my allergies kicked in a bit today, so sorry if I'm sniffling just a bit. So I can go ahead and create this slide, and then I can go get images. I can do whatever it is that I normally do when I'm building my slide decks. But when it comes time to make it interactive, I'm going to look at these Ask Students a Question, this menu right here, and I'm going to pick the question type that best suits whatever my need is. So we're going to walk through all of these different question types. For now, this is an open-ended question. So I'm looking at my text slide, which is just going to provide my students with a text box that they'll be able to type in. So I'm going to click that. You're going to see this interactive bar that's going to populate right here. We want to make sure that we don't move or erase that bar. That is going to be what allows for this interactivity. So that footer that appears when we add these question types, it's vital that we don't hide it, that we don't move it, that we don't delete it, or else our slides are not going to be interactive for our students. So I can go through, I can build my slides like this, like I normally would, add my question types. The other thing I can do is I can make use of some templates that we have available. So we have some critical thinking templates, some social emotional learning templates. Again, those non-content specific, more soft skill based templates. But if I go ahead and click our template library here, it's going to take me to our templates, our template library, and we have various templates available. So we have our core subject ones. We have templates geared more towards like the beginning of the class, like our lesson builders, our bell ringers, things like that. We have our in the midst of class activities and assessments. And then we also have our end of class reflections, our exit tickets and things like that. We have some more generic sample questions. We have questions geared more towards our younger students. So our kindergarten through elementary school students. We have ones for counseling. We have ones for art, PE. So we have multiple templates available to you. So when we find a template that we want to use, and we can use these arrows here to get a quick peek at what we might be downloading and using. And when we find one we like, what we're going to do is we're going to click this PowerPoint button underneath whichever slide deck we're deciding to use. So I'll go ahead and click that. It's going to open up a brand new PowerPoint presentation, or not a brand new, but it's going to open up those slides in a PowerPoint presentation. You'll notice though that it's a read-only file. It's stored in our Pear Deck OneDrive. So you actually need to download and make it your own so that you can go ahead and use these templates. And once you do that, the templates also will become fully editable. So you'll also have the option to go through, edit any text to make it more specific to your class, remove or add any images you want, anything like that. Once they're stored in your OneDrive, they do become your own. So what I'm going to do, and it is a bit of a process just because of the way our integration with Microsoft works. But what we're going to do is from here, I'm going to go to File at the top here, top left. And I'm going to download as on this menu. And I'm going to download a copy. So this top one here. We'll click download. And there is one more step. If I were to click and open this file that I just downloaded in the desktop version of PowerPoint, it's not going to work in that it won't let me copy and paste any of these slides. What it'll end up doing is if I were to copy one of these slides, it'll copy and paste it instead as a flat image rather than the slide itself that's editable. And when you do download these templates, you are going to see they'll have a slide in them that's going to kind of give you these directions as well, just so you know. But what we'll do is we'll now go to PowerPoint. We'll go to our main PowerPoint page where we'll see all of our PowerPoint files in our drive. And I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to upload and open. So on this main PowerPoint page, I'm going to scroll down to where like my recent files are and things like that. Click upload and open. Find my templates and open them. It's going to go ahead and it's going to load. And now I can go in and I can grab any of these slides that I want. And I can right click and copy, or Command or Control and C on your keyboard to copy that. Take it back to my presentation. And then with PowerPoint Online, you can't right click and paste, unfortunately. So what I'll need to do is Command on a Mac or Control on a PC, and then just hit the V key. So I'll hold in Command because I'm on a Mac, and I'll hit V. And I'll give it 1 second. There you go. Took just a second to load there. And now I can go ahead and I can edit this text. I can do whatever I want with that. I can change any of the images I want. Again, now that this is your slide, you can go ahead and do whatever you need to do to make it specific to your class. So we can build slides from scratch. We can go ahead into our template library and grab templates. But also, as a former teacher, I know that we spend a lot of time lesson planning as it is, and we spend a lot of time grading. We don't always want to reinvent the wheel, particularly if we're teaching something that we've used a slide deck for in the past. So you can do that as well. We can use an old slide deck that we've used in the past. We may have to edit some of the slides just so the activities make sense for our students, but we can certainly add these question types directly to slides that we've already made. And I'll go ahead and walk through that now as well. So if you can imagine that these slides that I have in front of me were slides that I had used in the past with students, and now I want to go ahead and make them interactive. We can go ahead and do that. So what I'll need to do, again, I'm going to go to my home menu here, and I'm going to find Pear Deck, and I'm going to open the add-on or the add-in. Now that I have the add-in opened, I'm going to look at my first question. Again, this is one of those open-ended questions. I'm asking my students to write me something. So I'm going to use my text slide again. I'll click that to add that type. And make sure that the footer lines up correctly. And it looks for some reason like it didn't populate the right way. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this slide, try and add it again just to see if that fixes that issue. Move that one. Okay, and there we go. I don't know why it didn't work on that initial slide there. But once you click that text slide, again, you should see that footer appear at the bottom, and now I know. And the footer also is going to give you and your students a little bit of a prompting as far as what the activity is. So for this one, it's letting my students know they will be writing a response. And they'll have a text box on their screen, which we'll see in a bit. Our second question type is going to be our choice type. So this is going to be for multiple choice questions, true or false, agree, disagree. We can do sort of any kind of polling exercise we want as well. And we'll look in more into that as we are actually presenting why that's effective. But I'll go ahead and just click choice. And now I have options for my students to choose from, and I can add options and I can subtract them all the way down to 2 for our agree, disagree, or true or false. So I'll go ahead and I'll type in my answers and I'll click update slide. Now, if at any point I decide that I want to change the options my students have, that's fine. I just click this choice button again, and it's going to show me what my choices currently are, and I can just go ahead and edit them and then click update slide to have that edit. My next slide type is my number slide type. This is going to be a lot like the text slide in that I'm just going to click number, and it's going to provide my students with just a smaller box, a little bit smaller than the text box, that they can type numerals in. And again, we can use this for like simple equations like the one I have here. We can also go ahead and use it to sort of get a gauge. So, for this one, I can ask my students on a scale of 1 to 10, how much experience do you have with Pear Deck? Our next slide type is going to be our website slide type. It's a little bit different than our interactive questions. What this slide is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to actually embed an outside website directly into our Pear Deck presentation. So again, when I was teaching last spring and we went fully remote, one of the things that I really struggled with initially was I spent so much time troubleshooting with my students and not a lot of time teaching because I was constantly trying to help students get to the right window, to the right application. And this kind of cuts down on that to a degree because we're actually able to embed some websites directly in our slides so that while we're in that presentation, our students won't have to, worry about jumping from window to window, application to application as much as they may have had to do in the past. So it is something that I think is super helpful in that regard. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to this website. And this is on our one of our help articles that is going to kind of provide you with some sites that work well when embedded with Pear Deck. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click this website button, and I'm going to get a preview box with an address bar here. And it looks like I'm just going to check the chat quick just to see. Okay, cool. So we have the address bar here, and this is going to allow us to look at a preview of the website. I know that if I have a functional preview in this box, that my students are going to be able to interact with this website as well. You also see this HTTPS right here. So this is just letting me know that I need to embed a secure website. If it's not an HTTPS website, it's not a secure website, Pear Deck won't allow you to embed it. So we'll go ahead and we're going to go to just the address bar at the top of our page. We'll copy the address and we'll paste it. And now I see that I can go ahead and interact with this preview right here. Now I know my students will also be able to interact with it. And all I need to do now is just click update slide. Now there are some sites that while they're secure, they don't embed well initially with Pear Deck. And if you run into this issue and you know it's a secure site, it may be because you need a special embeddable URL or address. Some sites don't like to embed with the URL or address that you get from the address bar. YouTube is one of those sites. So we'll use that as an example. So if I went to youtube.com and I wanted to go ahead and I go to our channel, And again, this is just another resource. If you go to our Pear Deck channel on YouTube, you're going to find some helpful videos as well. And you're going to find some pre-recorded webinars like the one we're doing today that can be helpful as well. So if I went ahead and I wanted to say embed this video, I can go ahead and I can grab this address from the address bar just like I did and click this website button and then try and paste it. And it's going to tell me that YouTube is refusing to connect. And it's not because YouTube isn't secure, and it's not because I can't do it. It's because I need to find a special embeddable URL here. So you're looking for a share button or an embed button. For YouTube, it's going to be next to the like and dislike buttons to the right underneath the video, this share button here. Again, I don't want to grab this link right here. I want to look for this embed icon and click that. And now you're going to see a whole bunch of code. I don't need all of that code either. If I were to copy and paste the whole code, it's still not going to embed correctly. I just need the address. So I need this HTTPS right here through the end of that. So everything that's in those quotations. And for some reason, sometimes when I share my screen, it doesn't like to allow me to grab just that portion. So I'm going to end up having to copy the whole thing, but and just delete around it. But you're just looking to copy this, what I have highlighted right here, just that simple URL or address. For now, I'll copy that whole thing. You'll see again, it's not going to allow me to connect. So I'm just going to delete everything that I don't need that is around that URL. And also I'm deleting the quotation marks as well. I don't need to keep them. And once I've deleted everything, it deleted the whole thing. Let's try that one more time. There we go here, and then just delete everything on the other side of it. Okay, and then you're gonna see you have this preview here. I can click it. And now I know that my students are gonna be able to watch this video. And when we embed a video this way into a website slide, our students are going to be able to asynchronously watch the video. So they'll have control over it. They'll be able to pause it and just work with at their leisure, but they'll still have your slide on the left-hand side of their screen. So any guided notes you want them to be taking in their notebooks or any questions or any instructions, you can go ahead and have there. They'll have them available to them as they watch the video. And then our last two slide types are our draw slide type and our draggable slide type. So the draw slide type, any image or anything that I put on the slide are just going to serve as sort of a background. And then my students are going to have tools that they can use over that background. So I'm just going to click the draw button. And this is something we could go ahead and add a graphic organizer, a worksheet. We want to be careful not to use anything that's like, because the slide will be a bit smaller on student screens, that's like too large, or we don't want the text to get too small. But we could put in like a small paragraph and have our students practice some annotation skills, any kind of art project, any one pager, anything like that, graphing, plotting points. If you want them to show their work while completing some equations, this can also be useful for that as well. Probably my favorite slide type just because of the versatility of it. And then our last slide type is our draggable slide type. So we can go ahead and have our students do any sort of activity that involves dragging an item to a designated location, whether we want to use it for a check-in or, for example, on this one, I'm having students identify the proper content or continent. So I'll click draggable here. And I can have at the moment up to 5 draggable items. We have 8 colors to choose from. I can either make them very large or small, depending on my activity and also depending on my students. If I have students who don't have a ton of technical skills, and they don't have a lot of experience working with like a trackpad or a mouse, I may want to make them a bit bigger just to make them a little bit easier to grab and move. They're just going to left click and hold to grab them and then release to drop them. For this activity, I only need one right now, but actually, no, sorry, I need 4. So for these though, we do have some items to choose from as well. So we have some, and I have a little key here, so I'll just try and pick those items. But we have some basic shapes here. We also have equation symbols. So if I wanted to, I could put like an unfinished equation or an incorrect equation and have my students drag the proper symbol to complete that equation. We have numerals as well. We also have just some other basic shapes. And lastly, we also have punctuation. So again, I could put a sentence in that's incorrect or incomplete. I can have my students go in and drag and drop the proper punctuation in order to complete that as well. And once we're done, we'll just click Update Slide. And my students will have the icons on the right-hand side of their screen. They'll just be able to drag them and drop them at their designated locations. And those are all of the question types. So like I said before, we could build slides from scratch. We could use pre-made slides from our template library. We could also use slides that we've used in the past, maybe just editing them a bit and then adding those question types. So what we're going to do now, prior to presenting, I'm going to show you some of the settings and some of the things on the homepage that will be more helpful when we're actually getting into presenting. And then after that, once we enter the presentation, if anyone has any questions, I'll go ahead to that Q&A slide and you can go ahead and enter your questions there. So on this homepage, once we've logged in, if you go to the top right of the screen here, you're going to look for your email address. And once I click that, I'm going to get a little drop-down menu. I'm going to go ahead and click My Account. This is where you'll go. So if you have a district subscription or a school subscription and you want to know who within your district or school administers the account, you can go ahead and find your administrator right here. You can also always click this link to write an email to our help desk, so help@peardeck.com. That's going to be for questions, technical issues, any kind of suggestions or feedback you have from us. You can go ahead and send that way as well. But that's available to you. And I'll reiterate that at the end when we talk about resources. But if I click settings, I have a couple setting options that I can make use of prior to actually presenting. So our classroom climate setting, this is going to allow us to get a quick mood aggregate of our students prior to class. And at the end of class, it's going to allow our students to give us some feedback. So I could turn one or the other on or both, or I can turn them off. But at the beginning of class, students will get a smiley face, a neutral face, or a sad face. And you can make them mean whatever it is you want them to mean just by prompting your students, whether it's how they felt about the homework or how they're feeling in general. But it can be nice to kind of get a quick update on our students' moods going into a lesson, just to kind of feel out how that lesson might go and if we need to adjust. And then feedback at the end of class, we can ask our students to give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down to let us know how they felt about the lesson. Whether that means we need to, reach out and discuss with students individually, have some small groups where we discuss some things with students and revisit some concepts, revisiting things as a whole, or if we can move on with the class, depending on what we get as far as feedback is concerned. We also have an immersive reader. The immersive reader is just in the interest of making our slides as accessible as they can possibly be. So it's going to allow students to actually simplify the text that's on their slides so that they can listen to the audio. They can change the font, the colors. They can highlight parts of speech. They can break it into syllables, translate to another language. There's a line focus tool. We'll look at all that too, but I just want to make note of that. If you turn that on, it's just going to make it a little bit easier for your students to access those slides and for all of your students to access those slides. Lastly, requiring student logins. So if we want the option to be able to see our students' names in our teacher dashboard, particularly when it comes to giving feedback to students and reviewing their responses, we want to go ahead and we want to have this on, and we want to choose what we want them to log in with. Since we're using Microsoft, we do want to make sure they're logging in with Microsoft as well. So those options are going to be helpful when we actually get into presenting. If we go back to our home screen, just by clicking the top left here, this home button with the little house next to it, if you look right to the right of this, there's also a sessions menu. If I go ahead and click that, it's going to show me any session that I've presented with Pear Deck recently, regardless of what slide deck or presentation I've used. So you'll see here, I have some that are open. Once you, with the same deck, so with this PowerPoint presentation here, I can open as many sessions as I want and have them run concurrently. So, one for each class period. And I, again, can keep them open. You'll see I have one in student pace mode, which means it's currently asynchronous. My students can work on it independently for homework. I also have a couple that are just live. These are ones that students aren't going to be able to navigate through on their own. But you'll see from any of the open sessions, I can always open my projector view, which is going to be that main presentation view that we're showing to our students, whether we're projecting it in the classroom or we're sharing our screens over, say, a Zoom call. I can also always open my teacher dashboard, whether it's for a live session or a closed session, to review student responses and answers, and I can leave feedback to them as well. Our more actions button here, I can turn off this student pace mode. I can always turn it on too from a live session. I can end a session. I can also reopen a session. So if I ended a session, I went through my teacher dashboard, gave my students some feedback, I can always reopen the session and then put it into student pace mode so that my students will be able to go back in and review and make any changes. You can also go through and just end them all as well. And then if we go back to this home screen, when it comes time to present, I can either present, once again, using this green present with Pear Deck button. I can also scroll down and you'll see I have this present a file from OneDrive menu here. This is going to show me all of the presentations that I've recently worked within Pear Deck with. I can also open a file from my OneDrive from here as well. But if I find one of my presentations and I click on it, you'll see a smaller session menu open. So it's going to show me just sessions that I've run with this particular presentation. I also can click edit to go back to PowerPoint. I can view the file in OneDrive, and then I can also start a lesson directly from here. So I can start a live session, opening it up in my projector view from here, or I can start a student paced session, which is going to allow students to asynchronously enter and navigate through these slides. Once I've opened a presentation, I can change between the two as many times as I want. For now, we'll go ahead and we'll open a live session. You'll see I'll get this window initially that's going to prompt my students to go to joinpd.com and to enter the join code. You can feel free to do that. I'll also be giving you a link in just a second in the chat if you want to do that as well, and I'll explain the difference between the two. So from here, once again, I can give my students this code. My students can enter this way. For students who may not have as much experience like typing or for like longer winded extended activities, we want to give our students a link. So this join code is actually going to expire in about a week. So if I want my students to go back in and review prior to, say, a midterm or a final, or I want them to continue to work on an activity over a span of time, I want to make sure I give this link. So at the bottom here, if I left click on give students a link, it's going to copy a link to my clipboard. This link, I can go ahead and paste wherever. For right now, I'll put it in the Zoom chat. You can go ahead and email it to your students, however you want to do it. But they'll use that link. They can enter your session. And then that link is always going to be tied to your session as well. Once I hit start class, you'll see the code will remain at the top right. And I can always expand that window again to grab that link or to show that window a little bit larger for my students as well. You'll see as the teacher initially, because I don't have any interactivity on this particular slide, I can open up my deck here so I can jump out of sequence to any slides. I can also navigate using my arrows here. I can also go ahead and click new prompt here. So one thing about Pear Deck is there currently isn't a way to edit your slides and have that reflect in a lesson or a session that's live. So if I go back to PowerPoint right now and I were to find a typo and try and edit that, it won't reflect in a live session. I'd have to restart a session or make a new session and provide my students with that join link or join code in order for those changes to take effect. But if I forgot to add a bell ringer, or I decide I want to add an activity in the middle of a session or an exit ticket at the end, I can click this new prompt button in my navigation menu. And I'll actually be able to drop in. I have a few pre-made slides to choose from. So some beginning of the class, during class, end of the class, some more generic slides, and I may need to just verbalize what I'm asking my students to do and have them respond. And then any slide that I'm currently on, I can make interactive. I can make them a text slide, draggable slide, drawing, or a number slide. So that's just available as well. We'll see from the student view, this is that mood aggregate. This is that quick mood check-in that I have. Let my teacher know how I'm feeling. And when we first enter, you'll again see that as the student, I don't have any navigation buttons. I don't have a lot that I can do because I am in a synchronous session right now. So my teacher is in control. But I do have this Immersive Reader button at the bottom right here. So this is that symbol. And if I click that, it's going to simplify any text that was on the slide. I can again listen to the audio. I have some audio options to make use of. You can go ahead and change the font. I can change the color theme. I can increase the text size and the spacing. I can break into syllables. I can go ahead and highlight parts of speech and change the color of those parts of speech as well. I can translate to another language. I also can use a line focus tool. And additionally, if I go ahead and I click on any single word, it's going to let me listen to the audio for that word. But for many words, it's also going to provide me with an image that goes along with that word to make it a little bit easier to understand as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move to our first interactive slide, which will be the question slide. So feel free to ask any questions you have. You'll see as the teacher, I have some options here now with an interactive slide. I can always go ahead and click this lock screens button at any time to go ahead and lock my responses. So now you'll see if you're in this session right now, you won't be able to type. You'll see it says its teacher has locked responses for this slide. If you had gone ahead and typed anything in, you'll see that it'll show you your answer. So if I go ahead and lock this screen, you'll see that it's going to show my current answer, but it's also going to tell me that my teacher has locked responses. Now, if I left click and hold on that lock screen button, it's going to give me an option for a 30-second, 1 minute, or 3-minute timer. All I'll have to do is just release, and it's going to start counting down. It's going to run away from my mouse so it doesn't get in the way. Same thing for my students, but they'll see that timer. And once that counts down, the slide will go ahead and lock. When I'm ready to show responses, and again, this view that we're looking at right now is our projector view. You'll see in the address bar here, it says projector in the middle. So I know that this is what I'm showing my students, whether again, I'm projecting in class or sharing my screen. The teacher dashboard is going to be your view specifically. You can always share it with your students if you'd like for them to see their classmates' names, their responses, but everything is always going to be anonymous on the projector view, which is nice when we want to show responses to our students, but not put anyone on the spot. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show responses so I can see what questions we have. And you'll see that the responses are going to generate here. They're going to generate in real time as people type. I can also put it in a grid mode here. So can you ask more than one question per slide? Can you do matching through the drag option like for vocab? So as of right now, it's not possible to ask more than one question per slide. It is something that we do get feedback on. And again, we keep track of that feedback. We let our development team know what teachers are asking for, what features you are requesting, so that we can kind of figure out where they want to go next as far as creating those features. Unfortunately, I'm not privy to the next thing they're building or anything like that, so I'm not sure if that's in the works, but unfortunately, that's not something you can do right now. If we're talking about matching through that drag option, the best thing to do would be to create some sort of key that lets students know and use different colors with those items to represent whatever the option is, and then just ask them to drag that. So if you wanted to do matching, rather than having like two things in different spaces, you could just have a key designate those items with a specific color or shape as one of the options, and then have them drag it to those options that you add to that slide in the background. But there's no real like legitimate matching option available at this point in time, unfortunately. What is the advantage to embedding a website on Pear Deck rather than directly into the slide through PowerPoint? So so if you were to embed a website directly into PowerPoint, but then run a Pear Deck session, that interactive portion is not going to work, unfortunately. Once you're in Pear Deck, the interactivity is going to be limited to Pear Deck specific interactive functions. So we want to make sure if we are going to embed a website, we're actually embedding it into that slide. Students on that interactive bar at the bottom, and when we get to that slide, you'll see they can always click on that link and it will take them to a new window with that website in it. So they can do that as well if they need to make the website larger for whatever reason or anything like that. But unfortunately, it won't be functional if you embed in the actual PowerPoint itself. And I have someone else typing. Oops, sorry. I think it locked. I'm going to unlock it. Sorry about that. This is going to be the last question that I take, just because I want to jump in and get the presentation done so that we don't run out of time, because there's a webinar directly after this one. So if you embed audio instruction into a PowerPoint and then use Pear Deck, the audio instruction won't work because Pear Deck will override it. Unfortunately, at this point in time, that is correct. If you were to have an audio function on your slide, it's not going to work for your students as far as that's concerned if it's embedded directly into your PowerPoint slide. And again, that is something that we do get feature requests from, and we do get feedback from teachers. So feel free. We do keep track of what we get, the questions that we get, and the feedback that we get in our webinars, but always feel free to email us at help@peardeck.com and suggest things as well. And again, we keep track of all of those things. Looks like I have one thing in the chat. I'm just going to check real quick prior to us moving on. Can students use the same link for a week, even though we are using a different slide? So if you're using a different slide deck, you're going to have to make a new session for that. If you were to add slides to the end of a slide deck, it won't update, unfortunately, in a session that's already active. You'll need to create a new session. If you want students, though, to use the link for a week with the same slide deck, they can certainly do that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move on now. What I'm going to actually do, we have the slides that we've already built. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put it in student pace mode just so we can see what that looks like. So here's how I'm going to do that. If I go to this more actions button, these 3 dots next to that new prompt button here, I now can go ahead and turn on student pace mode. And what that does is it allows it to be asynchronous. And from the student screen now, I'm going to see I have a navigation. I have navigation buttons here so I can navigate through at my own pace. And I'm going to go through each of the question types so we just kind of see what they look like. Feel free to follow along as well. It looks like I had a hand raised. If that person wants to go ahead and put whatever your question is in the chat, I'll go ahead and jump to that as soon as we start going through these slides here. So again, we have this first slide here. This is again going to be that text slide. Our next one is going to be the choice slide. So I'll go ahead and choose the option. Then we have that number slide. So again, just a smaller box, much like that text box where we can just enter a numeral. So here's that website slide. So again, on the left-hand side, I have my teacher slide. On the right, I'm going to have that website embedded, and I can go ahead and interact with this. Same thing for my video on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, I have my teacher slide. This is going to be the draw slide. So here's where anything I put is going to act as like a background on the canvas. I have a pencil tool that I can use to draw a very poorly drawn pear. We have a highlighter tool. We have a text tool. We can change the size or the width of any of the lines or our text. Again, there's that highlighter. We have a line tool as well. So again, if we're doing any sort of graphing or anything like that, we can erase, we can undo, we can also clear. But again, there's a lot that we can do with this slide. And our last slide type is going to be our draggable slide type. So this is going to be where I'm going to pick one of these items and I'm going to drag to designated locations. So I'll go ahead. And drag and drop. And all you're going to do is left click, hold, drag, and then release to drop those items. And those are all the different slide types. So now that we've gone through, we're in student pace mode. I let my students work ahead. And now I want to bring everyone back so we can review answers. You'll see here that the lock screen button has been replaced on my projector view by a stop student pace mode button. So I can go ahead and click this at any time and you'll see as the teacher, I'm on slide 5. I'm on slide 12 as the student. If I simply click stop student pace mode, it's going to pull me, the student, directly back to this slide so that I don't need to spend a lot of time refocusing. I can just bring everyone back so we can review responses. I'm quickly going to check that chat. Okay. So I believe it's Nima. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Go ahead and send us an email. I don't know if you already have or not, but send us an email at help@peardeck.com so we can go ahead and troubleshoot that with you. We'll be able to provide a bit more technical support once we get that, because we'll probably ask you for like some screenshots. There's a network test that we'll have you do, but we'll be able to help you with that. So if you want to go ahead and send us an email at help@peardeck.com, you can even go ahead and address it to me if you want. Again, my name is Mike. And I'll go ahead and grab that out of the inbox and I'll help you out with that. So just going over responses now, if I click this more actions button here, again, I'm going to open up my teacher dashboard now. So I can open it in a new window or a new tab. So I'm going to go ahead and open it in a new tab. And we're going to look at the differences now. So if we're looking here at this teacher dashboard, it's a little bit different than our projector view. You'll see I'm always looking at responses here, but now I can see my student names as well. Whereas if I look here, I'm just seeing my slide. If I click show responses on my dashboard or my projector view, I'll get a red border around the dashboard, around those responses. And now you can see that I'm projecting those responses, but I'm projecting them anonymously to my students. So now I can go ahead and I can sort these responses if I want. If I click this roster button at the top right, I can see which students are currently in my session. If I need to, I can go ahead and block a student from a session as well. If I scroll down to the bottom on a slide where I have a student or two who haven't responded yet, it's going to show me who hasn't responded at the bottom of my slide here. I can also go through and I can star answers that I find are particularly exemplary. I want to show my students them. And if I star an answer, you'll see that it's only going to project the answers that I've starred, and that it won't project any answers that hasn't been starred. I can also hide a response. So if I get a response that may be inappropriate for whatever reason, I can go ahead and click hide response, and that response won't appear on my projector view either for my students. I can also provide feedback from here. If I click this speech bubble here, I'm going to get a window that I can go ahead and type some feedback in for my students, and then click send feedback. I can add more if I'd like as well. In my student view, you'll see that I now have feedback. I have a speech bubble here that I can click on. I can see my teacher's feedback. And now I can go ahead and either add to my answer or add another response. You'll also notice that when I'm showing responses, it's projecting in my projector view. I can see it on my dashboard. Students are never going to get their classmates' responses projected to their screens. They're only going to see their responses. So if we are remote, we're going to want to make sure we're sharing our screen if we want to show these responses. Now you'll see for the choice slide, we have a little bit different view. So we always have our grid layout regardless of the question type. But now we have this overlaid view. Again, if I'm showing responses, you'll see that it's anonymous, but it does show which students or how many students have responded by choosing which option. If I hover over this bar, it's going to show me which names or which student has have chosen that option, depending on if I'm in the dashboard or not. But in the dashboard, I'll be able to see that pretty quickly. But again, this is why this is helpful if we're trying to do any sort of like polling or a debate or discussion, is that we can quickly show our students how many of their classmates chose which option. We have that overlaid view as well with the number slide. It's going to put everything on a number line. The largest answer and the smallest answer is going to kind of dictate how big that number line is, and then everything else will be placed on that spectrum. We can't show responses for the embedded websites because we're embedding an outside entity and it's not a specific Pear Deck interactive question. We aren't able to actually show those responses. For our draw slide, we'll have that list mode so we can look at them quite large. We do have that grid still. We can also look at an overlaid mode. The overlaid mode, if we're doing tracing or graphing or plotting points, can be helpful. It can be a little bit muddy depending on what the activity is that we're doing, but there are some applications for using that overlaid mode with the draw slide. Lastly, with our draggables, we have that grid layout. We again have that list. We also have the overlaid mode. Now, the overlaid mode can be helpful here because it's going to show all of my students and where they dropped their specific item. And then if I hover over an item, so if I have a student who had dropped one, way out of bounds and just didn't hit the mark, I can go ahead and hover over that, see which student it is, and then I can go ahead and check in with them and make sure they understood what was being asked of them. And that's our teacher dashboard. That's how we're going to review responses. Our projector view, this is how we'll show those responses to our students, again, always anonymously. And then we do have this student view as well, and we walked through that student pace mode. The last thing that I want to do is I want to look at our resources for just a minute or so. And I'll actually, while I talk about that, I'll put it in student pace mode. And if you go to slide 18, that'll be our last Q&A slide. Feel free to ask any additional questions you have. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back into student pace mode. And I'm also going to go ahead and grab the survey link and just paste that in the chat as well. And then I'll look at any questions that I have in the chat as well. Okay. And while I'm going to come back to this chat and just I'll address anything that's in there in just 1 second. I do just quickly want to show you the resources we have available. And then that link in there is going to be that survey as well. But feel free in student pace mode to go to slide 18 to ask any additional questions you have, and I'll jump to those in just a second. But I do want to make note. So I showed you the template page already. We also, though, have weekly wonders. So our weekly wonders are going to be pre-made slide decks, one for elementary school, one for middle school, and one for high school that we release every week. They're going to be relevant and topical to something that's happening at that time. And again, there are pre-made activities that are ready to teach and ready to interact with. We also have collaboration with Newsela. So if you use Newsela articles in your class, we have ready-made slide decks that go hand in hand with those Newsela articles. So again, they're ready to teach, ready to interact with activities that your students can complete and interact with after you've finished reading a Newsela article. And so I just wanted to quickly kind of make note of that. I'm going to go ahead and look, I'll show responses to see any additional questions we have. And then I'm going to quickly jump in the chat too and refer or address anything in there as well. So I'm really, really sorry. And have you not received a reply from the help desk in the last 2 weeks? Or have they been trying to kind of work with you at all in trying to address that? And I'm sorry, I'm just quickly going to just jot down because I do want to make sure that we do get this addressed for you. Okay. So would you mind doing me a favor and just email that help desk one more time, but just address it to me, and I'll let my teammates know to assign it to me. I'll make sure that I get in and I look at that. But I'm going to make sure that I do what I can to make sure we resolve that issue for you. Um, and I really do appreciate you kind of bringing this up, but I want to make sure that we do get it addressed for you as well. So it hasn't worked at all in January for you? So I'm going to go ahead and when we get off this call, I'll go ahead and look up and see if I can find those tickets just to kind of see what we've sent you as far as resolutions and to see if I can take a look at it and maybe do a bit more investigating on my end to see if I can help you with that. So I'll go ahead and look that ticket up, but just to make sure, can you possibly just re-email us one more time? And again, you can go ahead and just address it to me and I'll go ahead and make sure that we really go ahead and look into that. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay on like the Zoom call or anything. In about 4 minutes or so, it's going to kick us off because there is another webinar directly after this. So I do apologize for that, but please go ahead and do that. And I promise you that I will go ahead and address that and we'll go ahead and work to resolving that for you. Now, as far as questions are concerned, it looks like I have one. So is Pear Deck very useful for asynchronous online courses or mostly used for synchronous classes? It's really dependent on what you'd like to do with it. I've found that it can be very useful for both. So I know because of this shift over the past year or so to more remote and virtual educational environments, we've really tried to like ramp up the capabilities of Pear Deck when it comes to remote or online courses. One thing that I actually want to show you is if you look in the dashboard now, if you click this more actions button, where we would go to turn on or turn off student pace mode, and it won't be in your projector view, just in the dashboard, you'll see this invite co-teacher button. If I click that, it's going to give me a link. If I have a co-teacher and they're logged into their Pear Deck account, I can go ahead and send them that link. They can join my teacher dashboard so they can work directly with me in giving feedback to students and viewing responses. So that's helpful as well. But I think that there are a lot of asynchronous applications for it. We actually do have a remote learning webinar that is specific to what you can do asynchronously with Pear Deck that may be worth looking into. We also have a remote learning page on our main page that you can go to that may give some additional information. But the fact that you can put it in student pace mode and you can do that at any time. So you could do it the night before an online class, or you could do it during the day and let your students know that they have homework, email them or somehow get them that join link or join code. They can enter at their own time at home and they'll be able to asynchronously go through navigating through the session and participating in any of those activities. So it can be helpful for both, but I do think that there's a ton of potential for it as an asynchronous tool as well. I hope that that was a helpful answer. I want to take just a minute. If anyone has any last minute questions, go ahead and put that in. We're going to get kicked off in about a minute. So I just want to take this time to thank you guys for joining me today. I hope this was helpful in some way. I know that it was a lot of information. But again, any kind of technical issues, any questions, any feedback for us, please let us know at help@peardeck.com. We are here for you guys. We want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make your lives just a little bit easier. We really do appreciate everything you do. But I hope you guys stay safe. I hope you have a great rest of your week and a great rest of your semesters. And I'll just hang out until we get kicked off if anyone has any last minute questions. All right. Looks like we're about at time. So once again, thank you and have a great rest of your week.